Welcome. Good morning, good night, wherever you are tuning in from. This is the Blackout live from New York with your host, Tasemere, and my now co-host, Elijah. And we're here to celebrate and just discuss Black folks across the diaspora and to have an open dialogue about Black economics, how we reimagine trends in business and explore the magic that we have. Today, we are interviewing a viewer who has become, a comrade in this whole diaspora and ecosystem of urban planning. And his name is Michael Randolph, and he is at the Center of Nonprofit and Community Development. And we are going to be discussing all things urban planning, community development, community activism, how to bring people to the table. So let me bring Michael up. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm blessed. What's up, New York?
What's up? Miami, right?
No, Tampa.
It's one person has a show from Miami, you're in Tampa. I should have just said Florida and just been safe. So What's going on with you? Please let the people know who you are and what you have been doing.
So my name is Michael Randolph, and I'm in Tampa, Florida by way of Sandtown and Baltimore. So I grew up in some of the probably worst communities that you could have grown in Sandtown. And what I saw during those days was that every time somebody came to the community to do so-called economic development, the only thing we had left was us. So my hope was that I would grow up, understand how this worked, take it back to the streets, and teach people at the street level how to mobilize, organize, and educate themselves and be part of economic development.
So, you just said a mouthful. For people who don't know, and you and I had this conversation, for most people, they might not be familiar, but I am an urban planner by profession that worked in community and economic development. So Michael is definitely talking my language. But for some folks that aren't familiar with the lingo, can you just give a broad stroke on what economic development is or community development for people who might not know?
So let me development, because that has been a problem. Let me say social economic development. Social economic development is the relationship between the individual and the economy. Unemployment, lack of affordable housing, all those things. When you say economic development, and this has been the problem, it's been business to business. And we really haven't talked about what's the relationship to residents and why is that important? Because gentrification occurs all day long. The problem with gentrification is that we don't do smart planning. Because if we did social economic development, as we begin to bring up the development of a neighborhood, we will put people into transformation. What does that mean? That we will begin to provide the skill set necessary for that person to be able to stay into the community. So it's called social economic, understanding the relationship between the person and the economy. And that's how we transform communities and end gentrification. See, gentrification isn't a given. Gentrification is something that's stupid planning. We call smart planning transforming people, place, and things. That drug dealer, that particular person who had mental health problems, that mother who had 4 kids, making sure that we uplift them. Because normally in economic development, they are transformed out of the community. Our strategy is to transform them, lift them up, and give them the skill set. And we focus on economic development from a business perspective, in that we teach most of them how to start their own business, or at least how to make supplemental income in that particular respect.
So last week, or well, not even last week, on Monday, I was talking to Quita from Small to More, and she also has a show on the platform on Monday nights called Share Spaces with Chap. And we broached this subject of gentrification, right?
Yes.
And so my stance has been that gentrification really at the core means change, right? Like things are changing, and it's almost inevitable that cities and communities are going to change. And even rural America is going to change. But what happens is that there's this balance between racial and classism that's happening. And so for me, I think that a lot of what the dialogue has been is about the emotions of race. And that's because we're in America and race is defined by everything that you do here. Race is included in the equation of how people have access or don't have access. And what happens is that when as communities are changing, people feel like they're getting pushed out and they feel like they're being displaced and they're being outpriced. And that is also a class and economic challenge. And so, to Michael's point, we don't have smart planners at the table because oftentimes the folks that are planning what your city and your neighborhood or your community might look like are often not people that are part of the community. So what happens is that planning is happening all over the world. So America is a small piece. Our cities are a small fraction of that. Planners travel to the UK. They travel to China. They travel to Africa, out there in Johannesburg. And they're looking at how other places are functioning. And someone might say, hey, I was over here in the UK and they have bike lanes, right? If your city doesn't have bike lanes, it might eventually. I was in the UK and they have bike lanes, and it was so great, to see people bicycling around the city. And someone might come back and say, Tampa needs to have bike lanes because I just went to the UK and I had this great experience and it really seemed like it works really well there. So why can't Tampa also have bike lanes? Now, if those people aren't part of the community, they might not understand that you need parking, that, the bike lanes interfere with traffic, that there needs to be a whole education on drivers and biking because that doesn't really happen. They might be avid bikers and they might want the bike lanes, right? And so you start having this hodgepodge of cities starting to look alike, but also the functionality of the neighborhood might not even fit that amenity that is now being placed there because there was really no conversation with the residents in a meaningful way of, do they have bikes? Do they want bike lanes? Are they willing to give up parking spots for the bike lanes? How are the bike lanes going to take away from the sidewalk real estate that's on the street? So we just have things happening in the community that involves a lot of different city agencies that aren't necessarily talking to us. So that's also where some of the feelings and the emotions of like, they don't care. They're just like forcing this down our throats. And then the politics that are associated with that is that maybe your city council person, your assembly person, your representative is down for whatever that plan is. And then they come back, and often in Black communities, they give us the rhetoric of it's a racial thing. So we get all upset, we're yelling, we're screaming, we're fighting, we're protesting, we're angry, but everybody else has already went off to the bank. They're not going to undo this new infrastructure that they already put together. So we're going to have to live with it. And then it's just going to keep repeating itself because we, Michael and I, aren't the only people that need to be at the table really trying to have cohesive, to Michael's part, smart planning that incorporates all of the people in the neighborhood. Because we're not there, our voices aren't really being amplified and heard in the ways that impact policy and infrastructure. So that's just my tablet and my
that was so important. And that brings up why it's so important is First of all, we only work in the most violent and crime-infested neighborhoods in the country. And what we do is to come in, mobilize, organize, and educate the residents. We educate them on what is affordable housing and what are the best practices. What is economic development and what are the best practices? What is the best practice in terms of health? All these best practices, we actually educate them on. So as they begin to understand that, they begin to create their own table. And when they create their own table, we work with them in creating the 5-year plan. Once they create that 5-year plan, and the 5-year plan is holistic, comprehensive, it deals with economic development, social development, and physical development all at the same time. So as we training them how to create that particular table, we also train them how to deal with banks, investors, how to deal with government, all these different entities, because everybody has a different language. And it's all about the language. And once you understand the language, then you can do a particular deal. Now, I'm hoping that this, let me see if this PowerPoint will come up.
Let me try to add it here. I don't know if it's going to be able to play, but we can add it to the screen.
Good.
Here.
I can talk from this. Excellent. Excellent. So again, so we the Center for Nonprofit and Community Development. And what we do is strengthen organization and strengthen communities. Now, let me tell you ahead of time, it might be a couple typos, but I tried to put this together last night, then I had to redo it today. And what we're talking about. If one little child can take a brush to rebuild her neighborhood, why can't we all do that? So let's go to the next slide. Again, the Center for Nonprofit, what we do, our mission is to provide innovative, practical, and top quality products for our clients. And I'm gonna go through this real quick. This gives a little bit about me. I started like 30 years ago. I started as a community organizer, strategic planner, and then a comprehensive community planner. So this, I'm not sure if your audience is able to see all of this, but this tells a little bit about us. We're currently in 10 different states right now in terms of working with different groups, including Baltimore, and we're definitely about to get into New York as well. In 10 different states on teaching a new school, a new generation of thinking where you empower residents that they can actually do deal making. It's almost unheard of. In most poor communities, always that middle person that comes in and they tend to get everything. So we teach communities how to actually be deal maker, to understand the language. So let's continue. Okay, that's Alexa in the back talking. So this gives a little bit more information about us. Again, we talked about being in 10 different states. We're all over the state of Florida. We specialize in these 10 different areas. As a matter of fact, we do an online grant writing workshop at 7 tonight. And we've already got over 120 people that's going to attend. It's free of charge, and the whole purpose is building nonprofits and giving them the strategies necessary so they can go back in their neighborhoods and recreate and reimagine their community. And this time, they're in the driver's seat. So how do we do this? What's the framework? We use a psychosocial that deals with the mind, socioeconomic, I talked about that earlier, and a health approach to dealing with problems in the community. And we also base it on Kwanzaa, those principles, self-determination, all those things we engulf into our strategy. Here's what we believe, that you go from the individual to the family, to the community, but ultimately to the village. Because folks have to understand community is only a location. Unless you create a village, whereas I'm responsible for my brother, you don't really create an opportunity for people to really change that narrative. This talks about our methodology. And what we do is that we use assets mapping. And I think the person that you did the show with, she talked about assets mapping. We do assets mapping also. Because assets mapping that we use include 3 disciplines: economic development, community planning, with community organizing as a strategy to definitely change the narrative when it comes to poor communities. Now, when we're talking about assets mapping, these are the things we're talking about: creating a local economy where most of the residents we're working with own their own business. We actually went to the street, create a Wall Street in the hood, in the most poorest of the poorest of the neighborhood. We want to reimagine Wall Street by creating opportunities for residents to start their own business. So how do we do it? And this is the model that we use. First, we start with an idea that it is the community that controls. The community are the shareholders. And as the shareholders, you want to return on your investment. So as a community, you come together, you talk about your vision, and you create what's known as a CDC, a Community Development Corporation. It is the responsibility of that community development of a corporation is to act on behalf of the shareholders, which is the residents. And we do this by creating partnership. We create partnership with the private sector, institutions of higher learning, all those different partners that need to come together to make the deal work. And then we break it down into a strategy. That strategy focuses on economic development, social development, and physical development. The problem has been in the past that we tend to deal with social issues from a singlistic approach. When we have 5 fingers, do I say that? 5 fingers. So if we're not dealing with everything, we're only dealing with these 2 things, and these 2 is not working. Holistically, we're dealing with the whole thing: economic, social, and physical at the same time. How do we do it? We do it differently. It's hard because it's all about the money. And how do we bring in the money? Well, we use a couple different strategies to bring in dollars. We use the traditional way in terms of grants and social media. We also use what's known as, let me see if I can see the screen because it's kind of small here. Hold on one second while I read my own writing. I can do it better this way. Give me 1 second while I read from my screen here. Okay, good. So we're talking about social entrepreneurship. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we create a strategy in which you can bring in different income streams. The first is grants and social media. The second the nonprofits need to do is feed for service. The third is development fee. This comes in the strategy in which we teach communities how to create affordable housing, and they become the developers. Now, what does that mean? If neighborhoods will start to say, hey, look, we need to use all these vacant houses as economic development. That means we create a CDC. And that CDC is responsible for doing housing development. What does that mean? For every house you do, you kick it in $30,000, $40,000 in development fee. So, and you can use that money now to do your social program. Then you can do consultant fees. But most important, one of the most important things, you have to be able to create your own and operate your own business. That's what's critical. What we teach our residents and neighborhood groups and CDCs is that if you only depend on grants, you will not work. You have to create your own businesses in order to operate and continue streams of money that's coming into it. Do a need assessment, do a feasibility study, and create at least 3 businesses. Because here's the deal. If you create your own businesses, first of all, you hire your own community residents, and every dollar that comes into the community stays in the community. And then finally, what we're teaching our nonprofits is that you have to invest. You definitely have to invest. What does that mean? You got to invest in stocks and bonds and anything that's going to return that money to you. That is what we call passive money back to you, so you can continue your operation. And then this money goes to what we call output: employment program, public safety, youth programs. Do you see what we're trying to say? What we're trying to say, you don't depend on grants. That's a way to bring in money so you're not dependent totally on grants. That's what we call earned income. Okay, let me go back. Give me 1 second while I try to get back on point. Okay, good. Now, what you're looking at now is what's known as the West Tampa CDC Technology, Wealth Building, and Job Creation Center. Let me tell you how this deal was finessed. So, a lot of time when developers come to the community, that's a tendency for communities not to be prepared to do deal making. Well, in this particular area in West Tampa that we was working with, they was able to do deal making. So when the corporation came and they wanted to do a lot of housing, deal was that we need to create what's known as a community benefit agreement. That means we get something out the deal to give back to the community so we reduce gentrification. And that's very critical because you have to do deal making. Gentrification doesn't have to be if you know how to do deal making. And what we got out of the deal was that they will fund us to do this thing called the West Tampa CDC Technology and Wealth Building Center. So let's talk about some of the things that this does. Okay, first of all, it focuses on reducing gentrification by improving the workforce. Second, and this is most important, it enhances public safety by using an economic approach to deter crime by creating opportunities that remove obstacles, and increase hope. The other thing it does is to increase opportunity for resident-owned businesses. The next thing it does is to increase the community understanding of investment. We want to move people on the streets from a street mindset to a Wall Street mindset. We want young people as young as 9 years old being able to go and read the financial section of the paper and understand it and understanding how to do that investment.
Michael, I wanted to cut in real quick because you're dropping a lot of jewels on people, and I want to make sure that they are picking it up because this is totally my language. So when you're doing the community reinvestment pieces of the deal making, can you talk through why that is important or even what that is? Because I don't like, so for people who don't understand, when banks, for instance, banks come into your neighborhood, like the big banks, like Chase, TD, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, a bank, just think of a bank. They come into the community, and part of what they have to do is there's certain funds that are earmarked to that particular community. Yes. So they will say, okay, we're building this bank here, and our give back is for education. So we are going to make grants available for community groups that are focused on education. So tutoring programs, after school programs, that kind of stuff. Now you have to know what these and who these institutions are so you can know how to go after obtaining some pieces of the money, which is definitely some red tape and probably blue, orange, yellow, all this type of tape to get in order to access the money. But the money is there. So the same thing happens with real estate. So a real estate developer sees this empty, vacant piece of land or underutilized land, and they're like, hey, we want this land, right? And so part of what they have to do is say, how are they going to give back to the community? So again, it's this whole conversation that Michael was talking about that allows the community to make a deal with these real estate agencies, the banks, higher institutions. Like here in New York, Columbia University started buying up property in West Harlem, right? They were like, hey, we need this property because we need to build out new facilities, or we need to have dormitory or whatever. So part of what they did was that they went to the community board, and the community board in this case was representing the community and helped to craft this community give back, but you still have to figure out how to access the money. And what Michael is kind of saying is that you don't need to have the community board be the liaison between you and the community to figure out how to access it. If the residents and the stakeholders in the community come together and design their own organization, now the real estate institution, educational institution, or whomever that's coming in can now directly go to this organization that is earmarked to make these kind of deals to make sure that the community doesn't get the short end of the stick. Because oftentimes people are making deals with the community. They are trying their best. They're saying like, hey, so-and-so told me that I had to give $500,000 to this school over here for their new computer room. And we did that. So we did get back to the community. What happens is that there's these gatekeepers that don't give that information back to the community. So in turn, you see as a resident, things are being built and you think nothing is happening. You're like, they didn't come talk to us. We didn't get this. We didn't get that. And the developer is saying, no, we did. We gave it to this group over here, because the key is, if you aren't organized, someone else is going to get organized and go in and represent you, whether you know it or not, right? So you're griping and people are saying, no, we did our give back. You know, so-and-so came to us from blah, 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 blah. They told us that we had to do this, this, and this. We did all those things over there. I don't know why it didn't get to you. And you're saying, I didn't even know that this thing existed, right? So this is why this conversation is totally necessary, because the deals are definitely happening all around the world. It's the same kind of deals that's going on. We, the residents and the most important stakeholders in the community, just aren't keyed in as to what's happening, and we don't know where to go to get the information, even though the information is usually in plain sight. We don't know what we're supposed to be looking for. So how do people connect with you, Michael, and really say, hey, this is happening in my community and I want to, connect with someone that can help? Can you give us contact information, but can you also give a timeline on how long does it take to get organized?
Well, I can't let me start to get organized. It probably would take anywhere from 6 months to a year, because you actually have to go to the streets, and you have to, first of all, inspire people. Because the first thing people are going to say, well, I don't count. They're going to do what they want to do. And you teach them about CRAs. No, that's power. You have to understand the numbers, the money. Once you understand the money, then you'll be able to proceed accordingly. Now, it takes anywhere between that period of time. And my contact information, they can reach me at the Center for Nonprofit and Community at gmail.com. There's a Center for Nonprofit and gmail.com. But let me tell you about the deal we finessed. So this technology center is going to do a couple of things it's unheard of in poor communities. The first thing we're going to do with this technology center is to teach kids in the city, in poor neighborhoods, how to do code, how to do artificial intelligence, how to do mobile applications, how to do game applications. We're going to change the whole narrative, because we understand that technology is the future. All these jobs now that you got at McDonald's, they're phasing out the machine. So we're trying to uplift the community by teaching them technology. Can you imagine this in a poor neighborhood? That's one of the things we want to do with that technology center. The other thing is what's known as the production center in performing arts. We're using this as a strategy to get people off the streets and drop that gun and using mics. That's another strategy we're using. But we need to finesse what we needed before the development came. First thing you need to do is to get what are the needs of our community. A particular plan. So when that come, you get paid. I can't emphasize the need to the model we use is the community development model. Why is that important? If you're a community development corporation, there's special money that the federal government gives. With this money, you can build, a shopping mall. You can build affordable housing. All these money comes to you if you're a community development corporation. That's why we tell the first thing we say to the community, create a community corporation to bring it about.
Now, how do they create the community development corporation? How do you do that? What do you need to create a CDC?
So, first of all, you want to mobilize people and create a board of directors. You create a board of directors, and from there, you create what's known as a 501c3. What's important when you create that 501c3, a lot of people put down advocacy group, you don't. You want to put down economic and community development. That's the key terms. Because once you become that type of status, then you bring in all money. You talk about people don't know how many $1 million are coming in. And the percent of that money got to go back to the community. And you finesse it that particular way. But yeah, I would say it's easy to get started. It's hard in order to keep it running. So you start a 501c3 and you make sure you click that box. Community development and economic development as a focus for your CDC.
And so how long does it take? Say I decided I'm in Nebraska and I'm like, I know development is coming to Nebraska. How many people do I need to start this CDC? Do I need 10? Do I need 5? Could it just be me? How many
more? Because that CDC should reflect the community. You should have somebody from social service that understand that. Somebody that understand housing. You should have somebody that's poor on there. Poor residents is part of that, right? You should have community leaders, neighborhood groups. All of these should combine together to truly represent that neighborhood. So you have to make sure you got your stakeholders. For example, the CDC that I work with is really real because the two people that lead the organization actually come from the community. Make sure that the people that lead that organization is residents that lead that particular organization. These two individuals, the president and the vice president, because in order to do that, you have to get buy-in from the community. And the first thing they're going to say, who's on the board? Do they look like me and do they represent me?
Now, what do you say about folks that are coming, and this is always a question, what happens when you're entering cities that you aren't native to and you're giving your advice on how to plan? What do you feel like it's received well? Do you feel like you're an outsider? Are people like, hey, why couldn't we find somebody here to help? You don't understand what my nuances of my community is. Are those like, how do you deal with that?
Well, a couple of things. First, because of my background. And when I say my background, because I come from a background which is a poor neighborhood, that's a relationship established already. He's not part of corporate America. Let me listen to him. And then you begin to say, the power is within you. And then people start to listen. And then you say, this how it's done. No matter where you go. If you can relate to that population of people, for example, if you come from Harvard and you're trying to come to the hood, it's not going to work. But if you're coming from the hood and you represent the hood and you tell them, look, this is how it's done, you build that relationship. That's no city I've been to that I wasn't able to get a relationship. Once they say, okay, well, you come from where I come from, we can identify. That's what's most important. People have to identify with you. A lot of times what people do is that they bring like a scholar from Harvard, Yale, or an institution like a higher learning. That's not going to work. That has to be a representation of you.
So we have Joey, who has a show today at 6 o'clock, where he's talking about bringing faith leaders into the conversation. How we used to have a lot of faith leaders like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, that were part of our leaders into the conversation of something like economic development, and that is also a little lost and a little missing. I think that people do use faith leaders to manipulate Black folks about taking on certain projects in their community when they go to Black churches. I do think that happens often because they're like, the congregation is going to go with whatever the pastor says, and sometimes there's a deal there. Or here in New York, developers are buying up churches. They're buying up churches, and it's a really big thing because sometimes the members don't necessarily understand the deals that are being presented to them, and then they wind up getting the short end of the stick with the promise of building them a new church. So that has happened quite a bit here in New York, and I would just venture to say in other cities as well, where a lot of churches are starting to disappear on the map or being tucked away somewhere else. But Joey was just talking about Elijah talking in the background. I think he's really into this conversation.
We talk about that board of directors related to that CDC. There should be somebody from the faith community that's sitting on that board. It's like somebody from social service, somebody from the mayor's office. All these different entities should be part of that board of directors because it's a representation of the community. So for sure, there should be at least one seat for the faith community.
I agree. I think it's cohesive planning, right? And I think that the more people start to see urban planning, urban studies as a real career choice, in addition to all the other career choices, this is one of those disciplines where your work is constantly scrutinized, right? It's like a love-hate relationship. Sometimes people love what you're doing. Sometimes people don't like what you're doing, but it definitely sparks conversation around neighborhoods. And we all are part of a community. We all live in a neighborhood. We all access certain amenities within that neighborhood. So when people tell me I'm not an urban planner, I'm like, yes, you are. You totally are. You live in a neighborhood and you have opinions about that building being there, that supermarket being there, that pothole on that street, that bus stop, that traffic light. Something about the community makeup, you got something to say about it. And to me, at the very least, that's placemaking and conversation. So we all are urban planners. We just all aren't at the tables of planning the cities.
You really right. But I do want to emphasize how important it is when you do your organizing and you do your mobilization. Make sure you include those with substance abuse, with mental health. Those are homeless. All these people should be at the beginning stages because all of them come with a particular piece that makes it work. Traditionally, we've not decided to those people who are living mental health, and we go to organizations to plan. You have to make sure that you're inclusive. That person on substance abuse, mental health, all these individuals should be part of the organizing of the plan and make it work for everybody.
Well, of course, because if you don't include all the folks, whether you like them or not, whether you relate to them or not, they are part of the community and they are part of the narrative that goes on in how people perceive your block, your community. They also can, change property value there. They can impact developments of shelters. They can impact sanitation, public safety. And sometimes these are things that your city isn't necessarily going to pay for. Sanitation departments are strained just like any other city agency. So if you're saying that you're not going to think about the homeless or you're not going to think about people with mental illness, they're dumping trash on your street. So who's going to pick it up? Who's going to clean up the trash, right? Who's going to service them? And then sometimes because of the state that they're in, they can definitely impact local economics, because we talk about economics like this real big ecosystem, and it is, but there's also microeconomics, your corner store, your beauty salon, your dry cleaners, your local barbershop. Those are business owners, right, that are bringing money into the economic base of your community to provide certain services there. So if people don't want to come and open up a business on your block or in your neighborhood, that's going to be a problem, because you might have to drive out. And if you don't have a car, how are you going to get there?
You know, you can tell you got a background in planning just by the way you articulate what you're talking about. And that's why it's so important. I just want to do a really shout out to anybody that's on that corner, to all those mothers that's out there that's going through all this, to all those people that have lost hope because the educational system is not working, government is not working. You can't depend on them. You have to create your own, because nobody's going to save us but us. We have to educate, mobilize, and create a plan of action that works for us. Because you know and I know poor people are big business. So we have to use a strategy where poor people become part of the business of mobilizing, organizing, and being able to stay in those communities. But it's about power and understanding how to use power. That's the most important thing, because knowledge is power. Once you teach them how to do it, they can finesse all kind of deals, and they can really be in a power community, because now they got the money for their own programs. They know how to talk to banks. In fact, banks are running to them. Investors are running to them. So that's what I'm leaving out there to the streets right now, because that's what I do this for. I come out of one of the poorest neighborhoods in the country. And all I saw during my life was people coming in. Community still look the same. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And I was fortunate, because when I was in Sandtown, they came because Sandtown was one of the worst communities. They came in from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all these institutions to teach them how to transform a community. And one of the things they told me, because I asked so many questions, they said, you need to be a consultant, because ain't nobody going to know it from the community perspective like you. They admit it. We come from Harvard and Yale with all these institutional scholars, but you have to come from within. Learn this stuff. Go back to the streets and teach everybody. It's not about one organization, but teach as many as you can, so you can create a different type of people, because we're tired of being played upon because we're in a particular poor community. Do you understand what happens when a poor community know how to finesse a deal? How they can bring the money to the table? Whereas though this educate, we can create our money to create our own educational system to teach our kids. We can create our own pot of money for our own residents to start their own business, create jobs. We can do it ourselves, but we have to understand the strategy. And what we teach is a bottom-up approach. We think that in order to understand the process, you have to go all the way down to the street level and educate. Now, banks respect you. The government respect you. Everybody respect you, because now you got finesse to it. So at the end of the day, even if you think it's the worst of the worst, you can come out of this. It's all about creating a strategy and a plan and educating. And I say this because we become so dependent upon politicians. Right now, people are nervous. They say, well, the Republicans are going to take over. Well, using the strategy we have, you don't have to depend on government, because you got your own earned income. You got different streams of income coming in order to make sure you become totally independent. We become so dependent upon the next government that's in office. So we have to create our own, because we all we got.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, how can people connect with you? This was a totally like dope educational conversation dialogue that really can go in any neighborhood. This is not location specific. This is not about New York. This is not about Baltimore. This isn't about Tampa. You know, we have quote unquote poor neighborhoods all over the world, right? You all over the world, and Black people are everywhere.
Mhm.
So thinking about how we can use different tactics and strategies in urban planning to help revitalize your neighborhood, because it really starts at the neighbor. Before you get to the community, you got to start with the neighborhood, right? The community is a super large, big elephant to bite, but if you go neighborhood by
Excellent.
neighborhood by neighborhood, you can start to develop your own community. So, Michael, I would love for you to let the people know where they can
Cool.
connect with you. You guys need to definitely go and click the alert button, the subscribe button, the bell, the like, the whatever it is. Go back and replay this. There was so many different jewels and gems that Michael and I both shared around cohesive community development, and you're not going to get it anywhere else in any way. You would have to pay $60,000 to $100,000 to go learn this at a university.
It's true though. It's true. Because I learned from Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. So instead of going to those institutions, I took that knowledge. I was supposed to go to corporate America. I took that knowledge and came back to the streets. And I said, nah, I'm taking this knowledge and teaching my people. We call it a new school, next generation approach. We can't continue to do yesterday. We have to think differently. New school, next generation approach. You can reach me at 813-857-7657. That's 813-85. I almost forgot my number. 813-857-7657. Or you can reach me at the Center for Nonprofit and Community at gmail.com. But at the end of the day, I'm really talking to people in the streets. I don't want to talk to anybody but those people that have lost hope. It's about organizing and organizing and mobilizing and learning what they know. What they know. And then finesse it. People say, look, capitalism is bad. I say capitalism is bad. We have to use capitalism to get us where we need to get to. And that's the one thing I tell people. Debt is not bad. If you're an investment, that's the money going to come back. So we have to teach people. We have to use capitalism in order to uplift ourselves, because at the end of the day, it's all about the dollar bill. It's about money. And being able to control money in such a way that you take care of your people. And you can do it. They don't teach you that. You're not supposed to know this. Because you big business. Poor communities are big business for a lifetime.
Thank you so much, Michael. This has been a very engaging conversation. I know you've been hearing Elijah adding some ad-libs.
I'm saying this comments too, right? You see that news for the next generation, right? He said he's right.
His comments as well. You have been tuning into the Blackout Live from New York with your host Tasemere and co-host Elijah. We had our special guest Michael Randolph here talking about cohesive community and economic planning, development, vision. How do we get back to getting a seat at the table and building the whole entire table while we're at it? Please tune in to all of my co-hosts Monday through Sunday. We have various shows happening at blackusa.news. Be sure to click the subscription button or the ding the bell, whatever it is that you have to do. Share, tune in, be well. Talk to you later. Ciao.
Thank you.